Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, welcome. Thank you for your service. Let me start in particular by thanking you for your opening statement. It was a powerful testament to the men and women of law enforcement who serve on the front lines. Like you, I have spent far too much time with grieving families of the men and women in blue who have lost their lives protecting us, keeping us safe. Theirs is a difficult job. It is a job I think we are all obliged to take the time to appreciate, to say thank you. And I encourage folks to listen to your opening statement because it was a powerful reminder that every single day an officer wakes up and puts on his or her uniform and straps on his or her gun and kisses his wife or her husband goodbye for the morning. They may not see their kids again. And thank you for the work the FBI is doing to keep our officers safe and the obligation all of us have to continue to keep officers safe. I want to start with a topic that has been discussed some already this morning, which is Chinese espionage. You have described the threat of China as unique and the most significant that we are facing, and your testimony said that the United States significantly underestimates the threat of Chinese economic espionage. What avenues are we seeing where Chinese economic espionage is manifesting?
So certainly it covers the waterfront in terms of sectors, from startups, high-tech companies, all the way to aerospace, to aviation, to agriculture. We had, a case in Kansas not that long ago where they were attempting to steal, highly proprietary rice seeds that were being developed. The U.S. agriculture is the envy of the world, and that's a place where they've done a number of things. So it covers the whole spectrum of types of sectors. But then in terms of size of businesses, it's Fortune 100 companies all the way down to startups in Silicon Valley. And then in terms of types of techniques, it involves everything from cyber intrusions to corruption of insiders to things that are not illegal but are still a national security threat, different kinds of foreign investment, et cetera. So it's kind of an all-tools approach by them, and it therefore requires an all-tools approach by us.
One sector in particular that I've been concerned about is the academic sector and our colleges and universities. I've met with quite a few colleges and universities, research institutions based in the state of Texas, some of which have been victims of attempted or completed Chinese espionage. And one concern that I have, particularly in the academic sector, is their leaders tend to be, in some instances, less aware of the scope of the threat and less sophisticated and savvy than some in, say, the Fortune 100 world in terms of means of defending against espionage and theft of intellectual property. To what extent do you see Chinese espionage in the academic world as a problem, and what more should we be doing about it?
So I'm glad you raised it. I too share your concerns in that space. There's a number of things that are going on there. One is that the Chinese government and the Chinese Communist Party have a number of so-called talent plans. So, you hear about the 1,000 talent plans. And there's nothing inherently unlawful about the talent plans themselves. However, we have seen through lots of investigations abuse of those talent plans. And essentially, we have situations where it's created a pipeline, in some cases, at major universities, especially at the graduate level, more so than at the undergraduate level, of key intellectual property, sometimes that has dual use potential, flowing back to China for the advancement of its various strategic plans. And the irony is that the U.S. is essentially funding that economic resurgence through various money that it provides to, through grants, et cetera. So I think we do have to be a little bit careful that we don't find ourselves in a situation where essentially U.S. taxpayer money is being misappropriated for the advancement of China's achievement of economic dominance over us. there are a lot of cases where those plans become violations of U.S. law, or at the very least violate non-competes and things like that that might exist. And I think universities need to be more and more aware of who it is they're inviting over and what safeguards they can put in place. And so one of the things the FBI is trying to do a lot of, and in fact, we've had some very good work with Texas A&M recently to try to raise awareness in the university space so that, again, we're not requiring universities to do anything. That's not the FBI's role. What we're trying to do is raise awareness so that they can make thoughtful, voluntary decisions that are not just in the country's best interest, but I would argue in the best interest of their own academic research.
So I agree with you, and I look forward to our continuing to work with you to both protect our universities, but also to ensure against espionage of intellectual property. Let me turn to a final topic, which is an area of concern for me, which is the group that has called itself Antifa, which ironically is short for anti-fascism, and yet they engage in the conduct of fascists. They engage in violent protests, masked men and women engaging in physical violence. We saw recently the Rose City chapter of Antifa in Portland, Oregon, that was assaulting citizens, was disrupting traffic, violently assaulted one journalist so severely that he was hospitalized for brain hemorrhage. Likewise, this weekend, Mr. Willem van Sprassen, another Antifa terrorist, attacked a U.S. Immigration and Customs Enforcement Center in Tacoma, Washington, igniting a vehicle and attempting to ignite a propane tank. I am concerned that these are not isolated instances, but rather this is a pattern, an organization that is engaged in masked, anonymous, violent terrorism. To what extent is the FBI concerned about the threat of violent activity from an organization like Antifa?
So we are absolutely concerned about violence committed on behalf of any ideology, any extremism. And the key there, though, is the point that I think I made in response to a couple of different questions already, which is, again, the FBI doesn't investigate ideology. We investigate violent criminal activity, and if it's fueled by some ideology, then that's how it gets wrapped into our mandate. And so for us, Antifa, we view as more of an ideology than an organization. We have quite a number, though, I should tell you, of properly predicated investigations of what we categorize as anarchist extremists, people who are trying to commit violent criminal activity that violates federal law. And some of those people do subscribe to what we would refer to as a kind of an Antifa-like ideology. We don't think of Antifa so much as an organization as such, but I think we're saying sort of the same thing.
Although the Bureau has significant tools to go after organizations, criminal enterprises, that engage, that use anonymity, that use masks to carry out violence, groups like the Klan, groups like at times the Mafia, and I will today be sending a letter to you and the Department of Justice asking the department to open a RICO investigation into Antifa because I believe they are engaged in a similar coordinated effort. That letter will likewise focus on some local elected officials who have chosen to deny police protection to their citizens based on political ideology. That is a pattern, sadly, that we have seen with politicians who favored Klan violence, and I think every citizen deserves law enforcement protection regardless of their political ideology.
Well, I look forward to reviewing your letter.
Thank you.
Senator